Today, Cardano finds itself in a highly enviable position. For the last few years, we've been in a big giant race with a lot of participants. It was the Gen 3 blockchain race. Who could really solve the trilemma first? We were never going to be the first ones across the finish. All three of the Solunavaxes, to use Ada Well's favorite terminology, crossed first. Solana came across. The judges shook their heads. Too centralized. DQ. Luna, same. DQ. Avalanche, same. DQ. That left Ethereum, and they were the crowd's odds-on favorite to win, but their arrival was delayed and delayed. They finally crossed the finish line, battered and beat. No one was sure if it was late 2022, 2023, or even 2024, but there was no fanfare. There was no applause. Ethereum didn't know that Cardano had won long ago, and they were already hosting the victory party at the beach bar. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss Ethereum's announcement of a big delay for the merge to proof of stake, BlackRock taking a role in crypto that would probably make Satoshi rage cry, a new article on reference scripts and reference inputs from IOHK, and a great thread on what can happen with one-way public pressure in liquidity pools. If you've enjoyed these last 337 videos or some fraction thereof, I would love it if you would consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. For the last two epochs, we have once again minted more blocks than those online probability calculators would have indicated. You should also be aware next week is going to be a short week. You're not going to get the normal 5 videos. It's time once again for the Great Migration. Some of you will remember that prior to the world health situation, I would spend some amount of time on one continent and some amount of time on a completely different continent. I haven't been able to do that for the last little bit here because of the global health thing going on, but that's all kind of winding down now, and it's once again time for me to switch continents. So next week will not be the normal 5 videos. I'm not sure exactly how many videos you'll get. It'll be some number less than 5, probably 1 or 2. I'm not sure which yet. Maybe just 1 video next week. It's quite a long trip to this place I'm going. And it's been kind of a wild administrative process, filing all the correct documentation to gain entry into this place I'm going. It's been a much more robust process than it's ever been in the past for me or anybody I know. And that's obviously due to the health situation. And there's a lot of other things I have to do that I don't normally have to do to make this little transition. I think a tall prism fixes this one day, though. I will love it when one day I can use my digital identity to just grant the appropriate authority, the appropriate levels of access to the right information and data through the blockchain, because this has been a process of providing this crazy number and variety of documents to the correct authorities here in the most archaic method possible. That was the required method for me to provide those documents to them. It has not been an efficient process, to put it lightly. So I will greatly look forward to the day when a tall prism makes this much nicer and smoother. Today was one of those days when everybody in the Cardano ecosystem was basically saying, I told you so. The big question was, how long would it take Ethereum to get to any version, any adequate, acceptable version of scalable proof of stake? And the problem was always that it sure sounded like it was going to be tricky to pull that off when you're dealing with this shared mutable global state that they have in Ethereum. How do you get to something that looks really scalable when you have to deal with this gigantic amount of state? How do you pull this off? Here we have a core developer from Ethereum, and he's trying to give everybody a little update. He's like, here's an update fresh off the presses. Yeah, he wrote 2,500 words to cover the latest merge updates. It all sounds really great. There's lots of little emojis and things in here. There's fires, there's a chain, there's a money bag, there's like a scroll. I don't even know what this is. This is like a city. I think it's supposed to be Shanghai. There's like a brick and a fire. It's all very, very positive. Then somebody comes along and asks a very loaded question. Any info you can provide for the ETH miners who have been invested in securing the network and supporting the Ethereum project, or are we going to be left out to dry? So this miner's like, hey, you got any more info for us? Because we feel like we've been securing the network all along and supporting the whole project. Tim Biko does not want to be seen here as not letting them know they should not invest more in their mining equipment. He says, I would strongly suggest not investing more in mining equipment at this point, but that doesn't answer the real question, which is when is this going down? So the apparently the same miner asks again, appreciate the reply. Still looking like June for the plug pull, or will the mining community have some more time? I don't think the proximity of this phrase plug pull to the phrase rug pull was lost on this person. They say, still looking like June for the plug pull, or will the mining community have some more time? Cordev comes back and says, it won't be June, but likely in the few months after. No firm date yet, but we're definitely in the final chapter of proof of work on Ethereum. So everybody saw this and it got a lot of attention. You can tell here 234 retweets, 232 quote tweets, 879 likes. I think a lot of people were caught off guard by this. He's not saying, hey, we might be a week late. He's saying it won't be June, but likely in the few months after. Likely in the few months after also means it's possible it won't even be in the few months after. In fact, at least one publication led with the headline that the merge was likely to happen in the fall. And of course, other people were guessing, okay, if they're saying it's likely to happen in the months after June, that probably means that they're going to have to delay again at the end of the year, and we won't see anything until 2023. This has been the story of the move of Ethereum to proof of stake for a long time. These deadlines are laid out, and there's the accompanying difficulty bomb, which basically sets a deadline. They pretty much need to hit that deadline and move to proof of stake, or they're going to have to delay the difficulty bomb. And it's looking like here it's going to be delayed some amount of time again. And this is what's been happening repeatedly. They lay out this deadline and everybody thinks they're going to make it, and then they don't make it and they delay it again. It's very unclear when they'll actually get to proof of stake at this point. Meanwhile, in Cardano land, we basically crossed the finish line in June at the Vossel hard fork. Ethereum was on pace to theoretically finish around the same time as us. And I mean, really theoretically, we didn't really know what Ethereum 2.0, we're not allowed to even call that anymore, but we didn't know what Ethereum was going to look like after the merge. Was it really going to be everything it was cracked up to be? It was a little bit unclear, still unclear, but we know exactly what's happening in June for Cardano. Cardano, we can say with a great amount of confidence that Cardano is adequately decentralized. We're one of the most decentralized blockchains out there, much more decentralized than our competitors. Cardano is also extremely secure. We haven't had the kinds of security problems they've had in the robbery forest at all. We've already even got DeFi running on Plutus smart contracts. And no surprise, functionally programmed smart contracts seem to, so far, not have had the same problems that the robbery forest has had. We will have those problems. There will be thefts. Those will happen. But it's looking like the expectation has been met that it will happen less often than it happens over in the robbery forest in the EVM world. So we know we've got the decentralization leg of the trilemma down. We've got the security leg of the trilemma down. The only thing that's left is scaling. This is Basho, and a gigantic piece of Basho, pretty much everything we need to say that we are sufficiently scalable, is being put in place in June. Most importantly, we're getting pipelining and input endorsers. And in the AMA that Charles did today, if I heard him right, he seemed to indicate that was going to be something like a 100x increase in scalability. We're going to be 100 times better in that regard. And to be honest, things are kind of running fine right now. I mean, when we have some kind of gigantic NFT drop or some kind of gigantic new platform come on board, like of course there's some slowing in the blockchain, but it's pretty bearable. It's a lot better than it was just a few months ago. And it sounds like in June, it's going to get 100 times better. That's just with input endorsers and pipelining, which seem to be the really big things happening with Fossil Hard Fork in June. But we've also got reference scripts and reference inputs that'll make a big difference. And here's a big IOHK article going into more detail about those two SIPs. SIP 31 is reference inputs. SIP 33 is reference scripts. 32, you'll remember, is inline datums. This one covers 31 and 33. We've talked about reference inputs and reference scripts before, so I'll leave it to you to read this. But if you want a really straightforward explanation, if you still don't understand reference inputs and reference scripts and how much block space they're going to free up, this is a great article that explains in very easily comprehensible terms. It's on the IOHK blog site. At this point, it seems like no one can really say with any level of confidence when Ethereum is going to get to proof of stake and how acceptable their version of proof of stake is really going to end up being. But it seems like that's not the only problem going on over in the EVM world. We also saw this news today. The headline starts out simple enough. Circle raises $400 million as BlackRock explores USDC. That's fine. We already know that a lot of different big important entities in the EVM world, have always had relationships with Wall Street and institutional money and VCs and all the things that Satoshi probably would have objected to. All of those kinds of entities that were the sorts of middlemen and banks that Satoshi was obviously rebelling against when he wrote his famous message in the Genesis block in Bitcoin. So this, not that big a surprise. But if we scroll down further, what is kind of a surprise and would probably put Satoshi to tears is the role that BlackRock is going to play as a primary asset manager of USDC cash reserves. So we've got stable coins. We've talked in the past about how important stable coins are in crypto DeFi these days. Obviously very important. There are many circumstances in DeFi that require stable coins, the way DeFi currently works. But Satoshi would probably have rage quit crypto if he would have envisioned that one day there would be a stable coin as important as USDC, and the assets underpinning that stable coin would be managed by an entity like BlackRock. This is pretty much the exact opposite of what Satoshi was trying to accomplish. He wasn't trying to set up a new system that institutions like BlackRock could adopt, sort of like creep into and, control all over again. This is pretty much the exact opposite of what Satoshi was trying to accomplish. Was this predictable? Yes. I think a lot of commentators have been saying for years now that the herd was on its way. It was on its way to crypto. It was going to get there eventually, and there have been different predictions about when this would happen. But when BlackRock is the manager of the assets underpinning one of the most important stable coins in all of crypto, I think we can say that the herd many of us probably don't want in crypto, we could say that herd is already here. I know the rallying cry of Cardano DeFi lately has been interoperability with the greater crypto space. But for my own part, all I can say is that JED cannot possibly come quickly enough. I think at the AMA today from Charles, or maybe the previous one, I heard Charles say that we would end up getting several different flavors of JED. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm guessing it might mean that we might get different versions of JED pegged to different things. I can imagine we could get like a USD JED, a Euro JED, and maybe a JED pegged to a bundle of different global currencies. But if I have my pick between any kind of stable coin that is whose assets is being managed by BlackRock, or another stable coin I won't mention the name of, that has questionable reserve assets backing it, and any version of JED, I'm going to pick any version of JED all day long. Speaking of stable coins, here's a great thread from Dr. Ada, Dr. A. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce this, but this person is a PhD in chemistry, and they laid out a very good thread explaining in very straightforward terms what happens when you have a liquidity pool. Of course, liquidity pools will have a trading pair. When you have a liquidity pool and there's one-way public pressure on the pool, what do I mean by that? So in the case of this pool he's examining, you've got one asset, ADA, that, we can say that the public in the Cardano ecosystem has lots of access to ADA. But upon inception of this pool, the access to the other asset, which is a wrapped USDC, speaking of USDC, a wrapped USDC, no one really had access to this asset. It had been put into the pool, but people had access to this asset and not to this one. So what does that naturally lead to? Of course, a lot of people wanting to swap this asset, ADA, for this asset, which is a wrapped USDC. Why is that? He explains the stablecoin pools were established prior to launch via Melcometa, and someone using a private bridge to wrap the stablecoins allowed the wrapped versions to become native assets. And then, of course, those were deposited as liquidity in the pool. At launch, the only way to acquire these wrapped assets was to buy via that DEX. Users could not sell since the public had no access to the wrapped stablecoins or the private bridge. So if we look at the image he posted, you can kind of see what's going on. Everybody had access to this asset. Nobody in the public ecosystem had access to this asset because the bridge was private, in his words. And we can see what happens with this swap here. It looks like, if I'm understanding this correctly, it looks like the attempt is to swap $943.35 of ADA for some amount of the stablecoin. Because it's a stablecoin USDC pegged to the US dollar, you would expect for this amount here to be pretty close to this amount. Instead, it's not. You're losing quite a bit of your assets here if you're swapping from here to here, which is not really supposed to be the case with a stablecoin. But of course, that's happening because it's a liquidity pool and everybody's swapping this asset for this asset. So it changes the ratio of the assets in the pool and, of course, changes this price. This is a scenario we've examined many times in the past in explaining how impermanent loss works. Dr. Ada sums it up here. He says, in an AMM, arbitrage will normally happen to rebalance pools to market price. In this case, no one had access to the wrapped stablecoins in order to execute arbitrage. I really like that he ended this thread by saying that people should just pause before executing a trade that will see them losing significant value the moment you click swap. It would seem like that would be a very intuitive thing, and you wouldn't actually have to warn people about that. But I think there's quite a bit of FOMO informing decisions the second you have brand new types of assets in an ecosystem like Cardano, brand new access to wrapped stable coins. So this is probably, sadly, good advice for everybody. Hope everybody's having a great week, and I will talk to you tomorrow.